You say you're a good person, and maybe you are. You help. You listen. You concede. You say yes even when everything inside you screams no. You avoid conflict, lower your head, give up. Always willing, always understanding, always trying to keep the peace. But at what cost? You're tired, exhausted. A tiredness that doesn't just come from the body, but from the soul. Because every day you carry more than you can handle, and smile. Every day you swallow your discomfort, and say that everything is fine. You hold in your scream, you clench your teeth, you smile, you give in. You support other people's emotions while your own crumble. You carry silences that aren't yours. You hide frustrations behind programmed kindnesses. And all this for what? To be accepted? To be loved? Not to be seen as a problem? You've gotten used to disappearing little by little. You've learned that taking up space bothers you, that saying what you think alienates you, that showing your strength can be dangerous. So you began to shape up, adjust, shut up. You called it empathy. You called it kindness. You called it being a good person. But deep down, something in you knows. You know there's something wrong, because there's a silent anger growing inside, a diffuse irritation, as if you were always on the verge of exploding, but without understanding why. As if you lived to please, and yet it wasn't enough. As if all the effort you put into being kind wasn't being seen, or appreciated, much less reciprocated. You start to resent it, not out loud, but internally, because you feel that by trying to be everything to others, you're failing to be something to yourself. And here begins the uncomfortable truth. You've learned to cancel yourself out in order to be accepted. You call it kindness. But something in you, something deeper, truer, calls it cowardice. You fear displeasure. You fear appearing selfish. You fear being called harsh, insensitive, cold. But Nietzsche would say, you're not being virtuous. You're being weak, not in the moral sense, but in the vital sense, in the sense of someone who has abandoned their own power to please those who feed off their renunciation. That's the truth you've never had the courage to tell, not even to yourself. You stifle your will to protect the fragile. But who protects you? You strive not to hurt anyone. But who cares about the wounds you've been accumulating? You're afraid of appearing harsh. But the harshness of living while hiding your strength is greater than any word you've spoken. Nietzsche saw this kind of kindness as a death pact, a softening of existence that eliminates the creative power, the transforming force, the will to be whole. And perhaps you are living exactly that, a plot where your kindness is actually the prison of your power. You are not kind. You are being domesticated. And that's the question that starts to hurt. Until when? How long will you continue to keep quiet about your truth in order to maintain the comfort of others? Until when will you continue to cancel yourself out so as not to shake the fragile? How long will you continue to call the fear of being who you really are love? You can keep pretending that this is nobility, but your body already knows it's exhaustion. Your soul already knows it's a lie. And Nietzsche, if he were here, would tell you bluntly, the danger of goodness is when it becomes betrayal, not betrayal of others, but betrayal of yourself. You present yourself as kind. You listen. You care. You say what the other person wants to hear. You avoid conflicts, offer your shoulder, swallow words, always willing, always accessible, always good. But there's a truth you avoid facing. You are not kind. You're conditioned to keep quiet. Your kindness is not a choice. It's emotional, survival. You learned that being nice was the only way to be loved, that imposing yourself was dangerous, that showing your anger, your strength, your truth, could alienate those you needed to be around. So you molded yourself. You learned to please, to soften your voice, to avoid confrontation, to adapt to the emotional space of others, especially the most fragile, those who cry easily, those who make drama, those who blame you for feeling too much, wanting too much, being too much. You became kind because you learned that being truthful was too dangerous. And that's why, today, you're always policing yourself. You rewrite messages before you send them. You think twice, 3 times before saying what you really think. You tread carefully in conversations, like someone crossing a minefield. And when someone feels bad, you immediately ask yourself, was it me? Was I too harsh? You live in a state of emotional alert, but nobody sees it. Because on the outside, you look stable, gentle, balanced. Only you know how much that costs you. Because with every okay you say without feeling it, something in you dies. Every yes you say to avoid tension, you betray yourself. Every time you hide your anger to preserve the other person, you repress your power. And this is where the pain begins to reveal itself. You're not being generous. You're being dominated by fear. You're not loving. You're avoiding abandonment. You're not helping. You're hiding. Nietzsche said that pleasing the weak can kill you inside. Not because the weak are bad, but because by adapting to them you weaken yourself. You limit your strength so as not to offend. You hide your power so as not to appear threatening. You control your truth so as not to break the bubble of those who live anesthetized. But Nietzsche would tell you, life is not meant to be comfortable. It's meant to be intense, transformative, vital. And what you're doing is giving up your life to keep others emotionally stable. You call it kindness. But it's fear. It's fear of being hated, of being judged, of being misunderstood. It's fear of losing love, approval, belonging, so you do whatever it takes to remain the good guy, the understanding one, the spiritual one, the mature one. But this maturity is making you sick. You feel frustrated and you don't know why. You feel anger, but it has no target. You feel sad, but you can't find the source. Because you've been hiding the most uncomfortable truth of all from yourself. You are suffocating your will to fit into small spaces, to protect other people's sensibilities, to sustain an image that keeps you accepted but empties you inside. And in the long run, it kills you. Nietzsche believed that human beings are born with a will to power, an inner energy that drives them to grow, to assert themselves, to transform. But this power requires space, and what you've been doing is exactly the opposite. Shrinking. You hide behind goodness. Because being whole is scary. Because being true can mean losing people. But Nietzsche knew the price of not losing others is losing yourself. And that's what you've been doing day after day, dying in silence, in the name of a kindness that no longer belongs to you. What if your gentleness is just fear? That question burns, because you've spent your whole life trying to be a good person, someone who cares, who listens, who avoids conflict, who does good. You pride yourself on your sensitivity, your empathy, your ability to give in. But what if this goodness is costing you too much? What if it's not virtue? What if it's flight? Escape from confrontation, from positioning, from the strength you know you have but have learned to fear? What if you're sabotaging your greatness so as not to offend the fragility of others? Take an honest look. How many times have you written yourself off so that someone else wouldn't feel small around you? How many times have you hidden your intelligence, your brilliance, your firmness, just to maintain a balance in relationships where the other person couldn't cope with your strength? You think you're being compassionate, but in practice you're diminishing yourself. You're putting your soul on the back burner to keep others emotionally safe. There is a kindness that saves, but there is another that sucks your soul dry. It's the kindness that makes you smile when you want to shout, that makes you accept when you want to refuse. It makes you take care of those who can't even take responsibility for themselves. It turns you into an emotional therapist for people who have never offered you any real support. You think you're being a light, but you're turning into a shadow of yourself. Nietzsche didn't believe in goodness as an absolute value. For him, what we call virtue often hides fear, weakness, and resentment. He viewed with suspicion this impulse to always please, to maintain harmony at any cost, to not be a nuisance, because he knew the instinct for life is raw, it's creative, It's pulsating, and everything that represses this instinct, everything that tames its intensity, distances you from its truth. The kindness that comes from connecting with the soul is generous, yes, but it is also firm. It knows how to say no. It knows how to take a stand. It knows how to protect boundaries. It knows it doesn't have to sacrifice itself to prove it's good. But that's not the kindness you live for. Yours is a mask. A thin shell that hides an exhausted soul. You're trying to be good, to be accepted, trying to be nice, so as not to be abandoned, trying to be understanding, so as not to be called selfish. But deep down, you feel it. This forced sweetness is making you sick because it doesn't come from your center. It comes from your wound, from your need to be loved, from the fear of imposing yourself and losing someone who doesn't love you all the way. And what happens when you live like this for too long? You implode. You begin to silently hate others. You start to resent everything you give and don't receive. You start to blame yourself for feeling angry, when in fact the anger is just your soul asking to come back. Your kindness can be destructive. It destroys your power. It destroys your authenticity. It destroys your freedom to be whole. And Nietzsche would say, the danger is not in being good, it's in being too good, when what you need is to be true. You didn't come into this world to please. You came to assert yourself, to create, to transform, to touch reality with your living force. But as long as you continue to hide this to protect others, you will continue to distance yourself from yourself. The question now is simple, but painful. Are you willing to keep being good, even if it costs you your truth? Or are you ready to drop the mask and finally live? Nietzsche said, the weak invented compassion to protect themselves from the force that frightens them. That sentence can hurt, because it hits right at the place where your identity was built. You spent your life believing that being good was the way forward. That compassion was the supreme ideal. That giving in, welcoming, understanding, even at the cost of your own truth, was a sign of maturity. But Nietzsche didn't take kindly to illusions. He saw behind this excessive compassion a strategy of the weak, an emotional pact disguised as virtue, a moral system that inverted the values of life so that the powerful would feel guilty for existing with intensity. Yes, it's a shock, but look at it honestly. How many times have you held back your strength because it threatened someone? How many times have you hidden your ambition, your clarity, your legitimate anger, so as not to appear arrogant, insensitive, aggressive? How many times have you withdrawn, not because it was the best thing to do, but because your entire presence made the other person uncomfortable? You've been conditioned to confuse presence with oppression. You've been taught to soften your voice, your gaze, your desire. You've been domesticated to fit in, and all this in the name of goodness. Nietzsche denounced this as poison. Kindness that represses life isn't virtue, it's castration. It's a kindness that asks you to be silent when you want to speak. It demands surrender when you need to protect yourself. That idolizes softness, even when the world calls for urgency, firmness, rupture. When you hide your intensity to protect others, you surrender your freedom. You mutilate yourself in the name of empathy. You sacrifice your strength in the name of morality. And Nietzsche called this the morality of slaves, a system born out of resentment, envy, fear of power, a system where the weak don't try to grow. They try to diminish the strong, and you, without realizing it, have allied yourself with this system. You didn't realize that by softening your presence, you were allowing the weak to define the limits of your existence. You became gentle, but without strength, understanding, but empty. You learned to be everything the world accepts, and forgot to be what your soul demands. And now you feel the result: frustration, exhaustion, resentment, because the soul knows when it's being betrayed. Nietzsche wasn't against goodness. He was against goodness without strength, against sweetness, born of fear, against compassion that only serves to keep everything as it is, including his prison. Kindness without strength becomes submission. It becomes cowardice in disguise. It becomes survival morality. And Nietzsche wanted something else. He wanted life. He wanted power. He wanted the raw affirmation of existence. He wanted you to say, "Yes, I am strong. Yes, I feel anger. Yes, I want to. And yes, I will." But to do that, you need to break away from the illusion that pleasing is always right. You need to confront the idea that to be good is to suppress your fire. You need to accept that being whole will sometimes displease those who have grown comfortable with your absence. Domesticated goodness is not nobility. It's disintegration, and you feel it. You feel it when you no longer recognize yourself in your attitudes. You feel it when you accept the unacceptable. You feel it when you live in fear of being a nuisance. Nietzsche wouldn't offer you consolation. He would give you a mirror. He would place your virtue before your eyes and ask, "Is that freedom or obedience in disguise? Is that love or fear of losing? Is that compassion or running away from your strength?" Do you have the courage to answer? Because if you do, perhaps you'll begin for the first time to live not as one who adapts, but as one who affirms. And kindness, when born of strength, becomes something else. Not submission, but choice. The choice to be whole. The choice to be true. The choice to no longer give yourself away, in order to continue being accepted by those who fear what you came to be. You think you're being kind. You think you're caring. That you're doing the right thing. That you're being a better person by holding back, by letting go, by letting it go. But something in you is tired. And this tiredness isn't physical. It's existential. It's the weight of carrying your own strength tied up inside every day. It's the silent effort to control your legitimate anger, your sharp lucidity, your firm voice, just to keep the peace, just not to hurt anyone, just so you don't bother. You believe you're avoiding chaos, but the chaos is already happening. Inside you, because without realizing it, you've internalized the voice of the weak, that voice that once came from outside, from a fragile mother, an overbearing father, an insecure partner, a manipulative boss. Voices that couldn't cope with your entire presence, so they asked you to slow down, and you obeyed. Not because you were weak, but because you wanted to be loved. Today, that voice no longer comes from outside. It lives in you. It whispers every time you think about imposing yourself. Don't do it. You'll hurt someone. It shouts every time you try to say, "No." You're being selfish. It masquerades as awareness, but it's fear. It's conditioning. It's the ghost of someone else's fragility, now living inside your mind. You've become your own jailer. Nietzsche would see this with brutal clarity. You've been domesticated to the point of believing that your strength is a threat. And so today, you control it with firm hands. You hold back the lion to protect the lamb, even though the lion is your truth, and the lamb just a reflection of the insecurity that once surrounded you. You have become your own oppressor, and that hurts. Because the soul wasn't made for prison. You live this conflict every day, even without naming it. You hesitate before speaking your mind. You weigh every word, afraid of sounding harsh. You blame yourself for feeling angry, even when it's just. You diminish yourself to fit into fragile relationships, and the more you adjust, the more you distance yourself. You distance yourself, from what you wanted to say, from what you needed to do, from what you felt to be true, but which you kept quiet in order to preserve the other. But preserving the other at the expense of yourself is not noble. It's abandonment. It's a betrayal of yourself. It's the cruelest kind of submission. Voluntary. You're afraid of your strength because you've been taught that it drives you away. But Nietzsche saw the exact opposite. True strength doesn't drive away. It reveals. It reveals who is ready to walk with you and who was only there because you were convenient, meek, manageable. You live trapped between two versions. the one that wants to please, and the one that wants to break up. And this tension is unbearable, because instinct, when repressed for too long, begins to turn against the bearer. You start to sabotage yourself. To be late, you become excessively silent, punishing yourself for feeling. You begin to punish yourself for no longer being able to live in peace with your own lie. It's as if you had chained up the lion so as not to frighten the lamb. But now the lion is dying inside and the lamb is still afraid. Nobody has won, and you've lost yourself. What Nietzsche was proposing was not uncontrolled brutality. It was the integration of force. It was reconciliation with instinct. It was the courage to stop shrinking, even if it shakes the fragile relationships you've built on your absence. You weren't born to please. You were born to exist fully. And yes, sometimes your truth will be uncomfortable. Sometimes your presence will be too much for someone who only knows how to deal with shadows, but it's not your job to mutilate yourself to fit in with other people's fears. You've done that for long enough. Now perhaps it's time to let the lion out and see what happens when you finally stop oppressing yourself. How many times have you hidden behind kindness just to avoid being hated? Think about it. No rush. No excuses. How many times have you spoken softly when you needed to speak firmly? How many times have you said, of course, when you wanted to shout no? How many times have you bowed down in the name of peace, knowing that peace would cost you your dignity? You didn't do it out of spite. You did it because you thought you needed to. Because at some point in your history, someone taught you that being loved was more important than being whole. That being accepted was safer than being true. That pleasing was the only way not to be abandoned, and so you exchanged respect for cheap acceptance. You exchanged your truth, pulsating, uncomfortable, legitimate, for smiles that keep everything the same, for shallow validation, for empty compliments, for connections that only survive when you're silent. You call it maturity, but deep down, you feel it's fear. Fear of not being loved, fear of being excluded, fear of being really seen and rejected. So you've built up a persona, the one who always understands, the one who doesn't react, the one who holds the world back but never lets go of their own pain. But this persona is killing you, because every time you shut up to protect the other, you're destroying yourself a little more. Every time you choose to be nice instead of being honest, you reinforce the idea that you only deserve love when you don't bother. And that is devastating. You think you're being noble. But what you're actually being is submissive. Do you want to be loved or free? Silence. Feel the weight of this question. Do you want to be loved or free? Because sometimes these two things don't go together. Sometimes being free means being hated by those who only know how to love you when you're useful, predictable, calm, and meek. Sometimes being free means losing those who can only stand you if you're edited, anesthetized, fragmented, and yes, that's scary, because freedom comes at a price, and the price is dropping the masks. It's saying what you think, even if your voice shakes. It means pushing your own limits, even if the other person cries. It's sustaining your own presence, even if the world says, you've changed, but honestly, you're already paying a price now, aren't you? The price of living a life that isn't yours. The price of waking up with a stuffy soul. The price of smiling while sinking. The price of living surrounded by people who don't know your true voice. Because you've never shown it. You think you're being accepted, but you're being tolerated. Tolerated by those who only know how to deal with soft versions of you. And this tolerance is a prison. Because you start to believe that it really is dangerous to be whole. You start to doubt your own anger, your own intensity, your own desire. And then, more and more, you move away from yourself. Nietzsche would say that this is corruption of the soul. It's you corrupting your own power to fit into fragile structures. It's you betraying the life you could have to keep alive an image that pleases others. But what about you? Who pleases you? Who sees you? Who listens to what you repress? The truth is, no one can respect what you yourself hide. No one will value you. If you keep offering yourself in fear, Respect doesn't come from uninterrupted sweetness. Respect comes from the truth, even if it makes you uncomfortable, even if it confronts you, even if it changes everything. You can keep exchanging respect for cheap acceptance. But know this, one day, the price will be your soul. And maybe that day has already begun. You grew up hearing that the right thing to do is to be nice, that the world needs more gentleness, more patience, more understanding. And it's true, but what you've never been told is that true kindness isn't born out of weakness. It comes from strength. It comes from someone who could hurt but chooses not to, from someone who knows their own intensity, their own anger, their own power, and still decides to be fair, because only those with teeth can decide not to bite. The rest is submission, not kindness. Nietzsche saw this with brutal clarity. He distrusted virtues that came from fear. He knew that often, behind constant kindness, there is only self-preservation, a desperate effort not to be rejected, an attempt to manipulate the other person's acceptance through self-denial. And that is not virtue, it's self-abandonment. Real goodness, the kind that transforms, the kind that enlightens, is only possible when you are whole, when you're no longer trying to fit in, but to express yourself, when you're no longer asking for permission to exist, but taking your place with dignity. True kindness is only born when you are capable of being dangerous, but choose not to hurt, because you know your shadow. You've looked deep into your eyes and seen what lives there. The strength, the fury, the limit, the instinct, and yet you choose lucidity. You choose presence. You choose justice. But this choice is not a renunciation of strength. It is its most mature expression. Being nice is easy. It's the path to instant acceptance, guaranteed praise, the comfort of others. Being whole is rare because it requires breaking away. It requires letting go of masks. It requires the risk of being rejected by those who only loved you in your edited version. To be whole is to recognize your own fire and decide to use it to illuminate, not destroy. It's like the wolf that knows how to smile and chooses not to bite. That's power. Real power. Not the power that is imposed by brute force, but power born of awareness, from those who know they could dominate, but choose to walk alongside, of those who know they could explode, but breathe, from those who know they could win by shouting, but prefer to win in the silence of firmness. This is the kind of kindness that Nietzsche would respect, the kind of kindness that is not born of fear, but of choice. Kindness that doesn't bend, it rises. What about you? Are you ready to stop being nice and become whole? Are you ready to stop asking for acceptance and start inspiring respect? Are you ready to recognize your own power without fear of what others will think? Because in the end, the world doesn't need more people who cancel each other out in order to keep the peace. The world needs people who carry peace because they have made peace with their own strength. You no longer need to hide behind softness. You no longer need to confuse absence with maturity. You no longer need to diminish yourself in order to be accepted. You can be fire and still be fair. You can be a voice and still be a welcoming presence. You can be strength and still be light. The choice is yours, and it starts when you understand. Being good isn't about canceling yourself out. It's about elevating yourself. It's recognizing all that you are and using it to benefit life, your own, and that of others. Now, it's you with you. No mask, no filter, no social role. It's you with your most repressed truth. You who have always been contained. You who have always measured words so as not to offend, silenced desires so as not to frighten, repressed impulses so as not to displease. But the time has come to break this cycle. It's time to give voice to what you've learned to silence. So stop now. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath and think of a sentence you've always wanted to say but never had the courage to. That phrase that stuck when you were humiliated, The one that got stuck in your throat when someone crossed your line. The one you rehearsed 1,000 times but never said because you thought it was too much. That it wasn't the right time. That it would hurt someone. That phrase. Write it down now. Grab a piece of paper. The notepad on your cell phone. The back of any receipt. But write it down. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be fair. It doesn't have to make sense to others. It just needs to be true to you. Write as if you were letting out an ancient scream. Write with the pent-up rage of years. With the indignation of someone who has kept quiet for too long. With the urgency of someone who is relearning to see themselves as whole. Now, read it out loud, not to anyone, to you. Yes, just for you. So that your ears can hear what your soul has never stopped screaming. Read it firmly, with presence, with your whole body. Let the sound of your own voice reverberate inside you. You've spent years trying not to be a problem. Now, for a moment, allow yourself to be true. This symbolic act, simple but radical, is not just about words. It's about liberation. It's about breaking the silent pact you've made with fear. It's about taking back the right to exist with strength. Because strength isn't about shouting at others. Strength is being able to shout for yourself, even if it's only in an empty room, even if it's only to yourself. This is the first step towards recovering your will to power. Nietzsche would say that inside each of us there is a flame, not the flame of the inflated ego, but that of the soul that wants to assert itself in the world. This flame has been stifled. But today it got some air. Today it breathed a little stronger. And that's what matters. You don't have to go around shouting. You don't have to turn into a character who runs over everything. You just need to stop betraying yourself. This exercise is your ritual of reconnection. It's the symbolic gesture of someone who begins to return to the center. Someone who starts to remember that being kind doesn't mean being absent. That being loving doesn't mean being mute. Being fair doesn't mean being harmless. You can and must be firm. You can and must say what has never been said. Because as long as you don't say it, the phrase makes you sick. It rots you from the inside. It turns into tiredness, sadness, and resentment. But when you say it, something changes. You feel it. It's like an internal door opens, as if finally something in you says, "Now, yes. Now I exist." Do it for yourself. Don't wait any longer. Write, read, listen, and allow yourself to feel what happens when you stop diminishing yourself and start asserting yourself. That's how the return to your power begins. Nietzsche said, "The snake that doesn't change its skin dies." And perhaps now you understand what that really means. It's not just about transformation. It's about the survival of the soul. Because the snake only stays alive when it has the courage to shed what no longer fits, even if that old skin has been a shelter for a long time, even if it has been comfortable, familiar, seemingly safe. You've been living inside a skin that no longer fits. The skin of the good guy, the one who always understands, the one who gives in before being heard, the one who listens to everyone, but is never listened to, the one who is always available, even when he's imploding inside. This skin is already too tight. It's already cracking, and you know it. Every day that you insist on it, you feel your soul suffocating a little more. You pretend to be fine, but you wake up heavy. You pretend it's peace, but inside you there's war. You pretend it's maturity, but it's just fear. Fear of showing the strength that lives inside you. Fear of being rejected by those who only love you in silence. Fear of being seen as a threat by those who live off your restraint. But Nietzsche didn't see strength as a threat. He saw beauty, movement, life. Because the force that protects is not the force that represses. It is that which recognizes itself. It's the one that knows its own power, and doesn't use it to dominate, but to create, sustain, transform. You've spent too long believing that to be good was to shut up. But the world doesn't need any more silent people. The world needs people who carry fire in their hands, and yet choose to heal with it, who carry fury in their eyes, and yet look with tenderness, who feel anger rising up, but have learned to transform it into clarity, into limits, into direction. That's strength. Real strength. Strength that doesn't explode, but doesn't implode either. Strength that doesn't hurt, but doesn't run away either. Strength that doesn't need to hide to be accepted. That strength lives inside, and it's tired of being silenced, tired of being edited to fit other people's fears, tired of being disguised as kindness. You can choose to keep pleasing. You can keep smiling while you turn yourself off. You can keep swallowing words while inside you scream for freedom. Or you can choose to change your skin, choose to abandon the illusion of submissive goodness, to live the power of a whole presence. Will it hurt? Yes. Every real transformation begins with discomfort, but living in hiding also hurts, and much more. Because it hurts to live a life that isn't yours. It hurts to always walk with the brakes on. It hurts to love others. And forget to love yourself with the same intensity. So now, it's your turn. You've heard it. You've felt it. You've understood. Now speak up. Tell us in the comments. Which part of you is tired of pleasing in order to survive? Say it without fear. Say it for yourself. Say it like someone who is starting to break free today, because only those who change their skin stay alive.